Okay, we're back. And yesterday, or the last time we had a video, um, we went over selection, or layers rather. And I gave you the analogy of laying a clear sheet of plastic on top of your photograph. And when you have a layer, and I just made a new layer by clicking the new layer button right here, and you draw or you make any marks, those marks land on the active layer rather than on the photograph. Okay? And I can get rid of a layer by dragging it down to the trash. And we've also gone over selection tools. And I want to introduce you to a new concept today in selection. I'm going to go ahead and make a selection. Okay, and I'm going to ensure that my feather value in my options bar right here is set to 0. Remember, every tool has its own option in the option bar, its own set of options. And my feather is set to 0 pixels because I want you to see the difference between a hard edge selection at 0 pixels and a soft edge selection. So a hard edge selection looks like you cut it out with a pair of scissors, like it's a very hard edge like this. Okay? Under the quick mask to take a look at that. I'm going to drop my selection. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this value to say 40 pixels. And I'm going to make more or less the same selection. Okay, and now I'm going to take a look at it. And notice that the selection has a very soft edge. Okay, and this is important if you're going to do any changes to your photograph, because I'll start with a hard edge selection. We'll go back to 0. And I'll make this same more or less selection. I'm going to do a little burn and dodge on this selection. And when I do, and I drop the selection, you see this, it's like tan line effect here, because there was no blending of the edges. So I'm going to roll that back. I'm going to undo that a little bit. Okay, with my history palette. Remember, if you don't see the history palette or you don't see the layers palette, you can always go to Window and you can check that it's on. Okay, there's history, it's on. Okay, now I'm going to make a very soft edge selection. I'm going to set this to 40 pixels in the option bar. The feather value is now set to 40 pixels. Okay, and I'm going to make the selection. We look at it under the quick mask, we see a soft edge there. Okay, and if we do something like burning and dodging, and we drop the selection, you don't see that tan line effect. You don't see that edge, because it had a very soft edge in the selection. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is I'm going to show you how to combine selection and layers today. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. There we go. Drop our selection. Okay, I've shown you how to make a new layer, and that's right here. Makes a new blank layer. But what we're going to do today is we're going to copy part of this image up onto its own layer. So I'm going to select part of this image. I'll select the bulldog. And I'm going to first do this with a very soft edge, or hard edge rather. So let's make a hard edge selection of this bulldog. Okay, and I'm going to hold down Command J. And as soon as I hold down Command and push J, it copies that selection up onto its own layer. Here it is. Okay, and this was a very hard edge selection with no feather on the pixels at all. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my background, and I'm going to set my feather value to say 40 again, which is going to make for us a very soft edge selection. And I'm going to select the bulldog again, and I'm going to hold down Command and I'm going to push J, and here's the soft edge selection up on its own layer. So this is what a feathered selection looks like versus a 0 feathered edge. So we have a nice soft edge here or a real hard edge here, depending on what you set your feather value at as you created the selection. Okay, and this starts to become important when you start to manipulate photographs, because now I can take my move tool and I can move this over here like this. So we have two dogs. Okay, I can turn that layer on and I can turn it off. Okay, I can adjust the opacity right here of that layer. Turn him into a ghost dog. Okay, or we can just throw that layer away. Bring this one back. Use the move tool and move this one over. Okay, so being able to select an area and then to hold down Command and push J and copy that selection up onto its own layer starts to become kind of important here in a little bit. So we've selected an area. We've told Photoshop we only want to work on that area. We hit Command J, copied it up to its own layer. Okay, and here's a problem you're instantly going to run into, just so you know. Watch me do this. Okay, I'm going to make a selection here on this layer. Let's say I want the pool brush now, and I want to make it into its own layer, and I'm going to get this error, just like this. It says, could not make new layer from the selection because the selected area is empty. So I click OK, and if I turn off my background layer, I notice that it is empty. I was on the layer above it, and there's nothing there for it to grab a hold of. There's nothing for it to copy. So to make that work like I wanted to, I would need to have my active layer as the background layer. So a really good habit to get into with working with Photoshop is when you pick your tool, check its settings, and then check which layer you're working on. Check which is your active layer. So I'm going to go ahead and Command J my pool brush up there now. So now I have the pool brush on its own layer, and I have the bulldog on its own layer. Okay, and I can use the move tool right here to move the pool brush around. I can go up here to the bulldog layer, and I can move him around a little bit. Okay, and I'll remind you again, you can name these layers. We'll call this one bulldog. We'll call this one pool brush. Oops, make sure we got it. Okay, so now I can tell by looking at the names what these layers are. Or I can turn them on, turn them off until I find the one I'm looking for. Okay, so being able to select an area and then copy that area up onto its own layer is a very big deal. Control the opacity of that layer with the slider right here. Okay, and we'll get to these other tools soon enough. So make sure you can do those things today, that you can select part of your photograph, copy it up onto its own layer.